I hereby call the Norwood City Council meeting to order. Please rise for the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber, we pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Here.
Mr. Geraci.
Here.
Mr. Kelch.
Here.
Mr. DiNardo.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Braden.
Here. All members present. I have item E, amendment of agenda. We have 3 items to add to the agenda this evening. The first item is a letter from Blue Water Corp., which we will have Mrs. Williams read, item G. And then we have 2 ordinances, an ordinance denying the zone change and an ordinance approving the zone change. We will make those items I-1 and I-2 right after the public hearing. May I have a motion? Mr. Bonds.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we amend the agenda as stated.
Thank you, sir. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo? Any discussion? Mr. Braden, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said you were going to label that I.
Yes, sir. I'm going to put the 2 ordinances right after the public hearing.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item F, minutes of previous meeting. We do not have any this evening to bring before council. That brings us to item H, public hearing. The Norwood City Council will hold a public hearing on April 28, 2020, 7:30 p.m. in Norwood High School Gym, 2020 Sherman Avenue, Norwood, Ohio, 45212. Item on the agenda. John Wallace, representing Blue Water Real Estate Holdings, Incorporated, owner of 2037 and 2041 Cortland Avenue, located within a residential 3 with a planned unit development overlay zoning district, R3 PUD, is proposing zoning changes from R3 and R3 PUD to GPD-PUD, general business with a planned unit development overlay zoning district for the property addresses of 2037, 2041, 2045, 2049 Cortland Avenue, and 2038, 2042, and 2046 Weir Avenue, Norwood, Ohio, 45212. I hereby call this public hearing to order. Do we have anyone that wants to speak in favor of approving the zone change?
Did you want to do the letter?
Forgive me. I skipped right over that, I apologize.
No problem.
Item G, would you please read the letter first?
Sure. Letter from Blue Water Real Estate Holdings, dated April 28th, to the Honorable Ken Miracle, regarding 2037 and 2041 Cortland Avenue zoning change. President Miracle, I am writing today to respectfully request our zoning change request be tabled and the request be sent back to the Planning Commission. Our team members are unable to attend the meeting due to the COVID-19 situation. In addition, we wish to return to the Planning Commission to refine our zoning change request and address some points presented to us during our presentation in December. We would like to return to the Planning Commission within the next 60 days, barring any challenges associated with the present COVID-19 situation. Before we request the zoning change, we wish to work with the residents of the neighborhood to garner feedback for planned refurbishment and change of use of the building. Our vision is to create a biotech business incubator anchored by Blue Water Vaccines Incorporated, a company developing a universal influenza vaccine in the former school, and refurbish the sanctuary to provide a community gathering place while preserving the rich history of the church. Thank you for your time and understanding. We wish to be partners with the City of Norwood and the residents of the neighborhood and commit to being good corporate citizens and working with the city and residents to achieve our goals to create jobs, increase property values, and provide additional tax revenue to the city. Kind regards, Joseph Hernandez, Chairman and CEO.
Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we receive and file the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. We have a motion to receive and file the letter. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Now, item H, public hearing. Do we have anyone that would like to speak in favor of the zoning approval?
You may need to repeat that loud back that way. Yeah. Just so they can hear.
Is there anyone here that wants to speak in favor of the PUD change? Do we have anyone that would like to speak against? Mr. Montgomery?
Down to use that mic over there?
Is that one there?
You want to use this one?
Do we have another one?
That's fine.
Yeah, that's the only other one that's free.
Thank you, sir. Please state your name and address, sir.
Is he on there?
Yes.
My name is Cleon Montgomery, and I live at 2045 Cortland Avenue, one of the houses that's you just read off, that this young lady just read off. And I've lived in Norwood my entire life, so I'm not going to sit and say how many years, because looking around here, I'm older than everybody in this building. Most of you played baseball, or I knew your dads. That's even the mayors. Wow. But no, the reason that I came up is because where I live at now is 2045 Cortland, and I live right next to the school and the church. And on that street, as it is right now, you know, on the side that I live on, there's really only 2 homes on that side. Now, you had the church up on the corner. Well, it's not on the corner, but it's almost up the Montgomery Road, and the pastor lives in that house. But I don't think it's even mentioned in this, and I don't want it to be. But, and let's see, then we have, you know, the people that live next to me, I had to talk with them. They feel the same way that we do, and I think about everybody on the street does. Now, some of them, I guess, just couldn't make it. But, you know, I was at the other meeting, and I've talked to these, you know, when they first came up here, or came to Norwood, really, they're very nice people, very professional. The gentleman's name is Joseph, I believe, and he come over and talked to me, invited me over, showed me inside the building, which I knew anyway. But they did do some work on the building. They did do some painting, and I think did a little bit of work on the roof and things like that. And because I did think when they first got there, they had good intentions, but I think those intentions left real quick. Because the day, I knew I found this out, the day, and I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this, I'm not, I'm real close, the day that they requested for a change in their zoning, and mine and our neighbors, the very next day they put it up for sale. And somebody can check at it or do whatever they want to. If I'm not right on it, I'm awful close. And, you know, they have got it listed right now for sale. You know, so if they're going to do all this stuff with the viruses and all these things, which all sounds great, and that would be good if somebody could do something with all that, but why sell it? I mean, why would you have it up for sale? It was up for sale for $650,000. It is now up for sale for $550,000. And I've not seen anybody looking at it, so I don't know what's going to happen there. But if I was selling the property, or if I wanted to sell my property, I would keep it up. All I ask you to do is drive by there and take a look at the front, and I think you'll see what I'm talking about. I know my neighbors are sitting right back here. They live down the street. They keep their yard immaculate, and we compete with each other. But, you know, we're proud of that. We're proud of the houses. We're proud of the neighborhood. But if you think about that neighborhood, on the other side of the street, you got the furniture store, the office building, the parking lot, and there used to be, I think, 3 houses right there. They're gone, okay? And at the other corner, you've got, well, it used to be a smoke, where they sold, what they call a smoke shop, or whatever they call them. And now it's grocery. You know, I guess they bought it out and turned it all into a grocery. Okay, so you got a grocery, you got an office building across the street, you got the church, then you come down to my neighbor's house, my house, then you got the school, and you got the church, which is all really one, but that's right there. Then you got Allison School. So, you know, there's nothing left. I mean, and I love the street, I love our neighbors, they're all good people. We have a group home there, but I gotta be honest with you, you never hear anything out of them, which I think is great, and, you know, but, you know, I just don't understand the thinking, because I know when they, if it passes, it's going to change everything for my wife and I. And, you know, because the property, at least I feel like, you know, I've kept my property up very well. And I've put a lot of money in that property, and I know other people have down through there too. And I know it'll become, if they change it to business, my property will become non-conformative. In other words, I'll have to, if I go to sell it, which I don't plan on doing, not right now, or, you know, even though it's a big house and it's just my wife and I now, but it'd be non-conformative. Then if I go to sell it, I'm going to have to sell it as a business, because somebody's not going to walk in and buy that house and knowing that it's own business. And so I just don't understand the, you know, and I think I'm right on that. I hope I'm, you know, what I'm saying is right, because I went up to the city hall, and I studied all this, went through every bit of it, and I haven't done that much work on stuff since I was a GM, but you know, it's but it would be to become non-conforming uses and buildings, and I even got the chapter and the, you know, where you can refer to, and I guess just about anything you need on that as far as I'm concerned. But these are just things I put down, because I only got, what, 5 minutes? You're fine. Okay. Okay, it's got, I already said that, the group home too, I got all that. The traffic on that street and on Ware, both streets, because it's not a big street, and everybody here probably knows it, you've all been down through there one time or another. And if the school was open, either school, Allison or that one, it'd be terrible. You wouldn't be able to get up and down that street. And with the church on the corner, they're good people. They keep it nice, and they park on the street and that. But when they park there, only one car can get down that street at a time. You know, you have to pull over to the side so the other one can get by. And the same thing's on Ware. It's exactly the same. And I guess I feel like, you know, I want to see Norwood grow. I want to see it be the Norwood that I'm used to it being. And that's the way I, you know, like Norwood. And, you know, if I wanted to leave Norwood, I'd have left when GM closed. But I like it right where I'm at. And now, you know, but if this changes, then that's going to change my thinking and probably a lot of other people's. I'd love to see them do something with that property. You know, I mean, all that property. You take Allison School, sitting there, you know, then you got the church and you got the school. I wish the school was still there. Everybody kept saying we were crazy when we bought there because of all the kids. Them kids never ever bothered anybody. You know, it was a Baptist school, and then you had the church, and they wouldn't even come in my yard. I had to get stuff to give it back to them. The kids wouldn't even come in there. But, so I just don't see, you know, to me, I guess I feel like this company or whatever their plans are, you think as big as they are, and if they're going to do as much as they say they are, would have checked out the zoning before they bought it. But they didn't. And at the first meeting, when we were there, the people they had represent them was a young lady and this gentleman. I got their names somewhere. And they were nice, exceptional, very professional. They didn't even know the property was up for sale. And they were at that meeting talking, you know, why that place is, you know, why it should be rezoned. And they didn't even know it was up for sale. In fact, she was embarrassed. And after it was over, there's a gentleman there, and he's not here now, I don't think, but he talked to the lady and the gentleman from this company, and he suggested to them that they, after the meeting, because they lost, that vote went down, After that, he said, you need to get with the residents and talk to them, see if you can work some things out. I was standing there. And the lady said, oh, we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll get with them. She even talked to me. Very, very, like I said, very professional, very smart. And she told me that they'd be getting in touch with us. And let's see, that's been before the first of the year, and I've not heard from them yet. And I did call her one time. And the answer I received then was she was in California at that time, and that she didn't really know if anything was going to happen or what. You know, that's the answer I had. I knew we'd be back up here. I just didn't know when. And the only thing I can say is that I think if they do that, and then they sell it, what goes in there? What's the guarantee of what's going to go in there? We have no idea. They're saying all this that they're going to do. You know, you think they'd be doing something now, getting it ready. You think they do, except painting it inside and all that. And they did have painters come out and look at the outside. And they told me they was going to have their yard looking as good as our yard. And I spend most of my time after I do mine cleaning the walkway up between theirs and my house, keeping the leaves and stuff out of my yard. So, and I could go on, but there's no sense in it because, you know, all I know is that I think it would hurt us. It would definitely hurt me. It would hurt my neighbors. It would hurt the neighbors right over here because I think it would affect our property, taxes, whatever. I don't, you know, what all would it affect? Keith, you could probably tell me that. And so, you know, that's all I know to say on it. You know, I could keep talking. If somebody wants to ask me anything, I'll, you know, I don't care to answer it if I can.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I got your first name, Joseph, and your last name, sir?
No, first name's Cleon.
Cleon.
There's only one name like that.
Cleon? Okay, what's your last name, sir?
Montgomery.
Montgomery. Thank you, sir. So you mentioned the other meeting. So you asked your other meeting. So this was at the Board of Zoning.
Yeah, it was up at City Hall.
They
It
turned
was up at the
that
City
down.
Council meeting.
And they turned it down.
Planning
Yes, it did.
We don't want you planning.
It wouldn't even, I don't think anybody was for it.
So how did this get, so they're coming again to try it again, I guess? This is round number 2?
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Bonsall.
Well, you want my, could I give you my opinion on that?
please do.
Because it went down then, I think their thought process was, wait till after the elections, and I think that was even mentioned, and, you know, you'll have a whole new group of people, and you can resubmit, and that's when they said talk to the, you know, talk to the residents and see if you can work something out with them, or whatever.
So you said you worked at General Motors?
Yeah, for 38 years.
What year did you start?
Did I say that? 65.
65?
No, really, yeah, 60. I got out of high school in 65, and I started at General Motors. I was there 93 days, and I got drafted, and I was in Vietnam 6 months later.
Maybe you built the car I just bought. I just got an 84 Camaro. Maybe
Is it running good?
runs great.
Yeah, I'll build it.
Okay, so
Mr.
that's all I got for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, like I said, I could provide some information on why we're here today. So the applicants had applied for a zoning change, and because there's something in Norwood's zoning code that you can't apply for a zoning change just for your property, they had to apply for other properties nearby. And so this zoning change that they applied for was not just for the building, but it was for houses like Mr. Montgomery's house as well. The Planning Commission late last year, I don't know the exact date, but they met on December 4th, 2019. So there wasn't time last year for, the Planning Commission denied it. So they said that no, we're not going to, approve it. The residents were there. There were a lot of residents there that day. Mr. Montgomery was there, of course, and they had just found out, the mayor had found out, and others had found out that it was up for sale, and they pushed them on it, and exactly like Mr. Montgomery said. So it was denied, but there wasn't time for the previous council to consider it. So that is why we are here today. So we can so there's 2 ordinances that are on the agenda. We could approve, one of the ordinances is to deny the request for a zone change, basically to agree with the Planning Commission. The other one is to approve it. And so if we deny the request for a zone change, essentially staying with the Planning Commission, I think we can just deny it with a majority vote. If we want to go against the Planning Commission's recommendation, something I'm not in favor of, I think it takes a three-quarter vote to go against, it takes a three-quarter vote to approve that ordinance. So just kind of, that's why we're here, and kind of that's the background there. And I will just say too that, it is just appreciative that you've come back again. When we get to the point, I hope that we do take an action today and not just table an ordinance, just because the residents have already taken the time to be here, and they took the time to be at the last one as well. So, sorry, that's all I have to say. Didn't mean to interrupt the public hearing there.
You're good.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Any other comments? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Bonzo. I would also recommend, if they've already denied it and for reasons that we don't know, I would hesitate that we would pass that tonight knowing that they denied it. So, well, that's the other comment that I have. Thank you.
Mr. DiNardo?
I don't mean to take anybody's...
We're trying to get in the public hearing part,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
we want to get back to that. The discussion can happen under the ordinance. So.
Yes, sir. Mr. Montgomery, do you have anything else to add, sir?
Not unless anybody wants to ask me any other questions, just that, I guess I feel like if they're going to do something with that property for Norwood, just for the sake of Norwood, then they should take it all and put something nice in there, whether it be condos or something that would help the city of Norwood, help get more residents. That's the way I feel. And, like I said, I could sit here and talk for another 20 minutes on it, I guess, but I'm not going to really say any more than what I already have. And I keep looking at Mumper, because last time I seen him, he wasn't even big enough to...
Called you Mumper. Called you Mumper.
Yeah, I'm James Bonsall, but it's okay.
What is it?
I'm James Bonsall, not Mumper, but
Well, who said Mumper? I thought somebody said that.
you're fine. You're totally good. You're totally good. So.
Okay, then I didn't know you when you did that.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you, sir.
Thank all of you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak against? Please state your name and address, sir.
James Balistrieri, 2022 Cortland Avenue, 45212. We have lived on Cortland Avenue for 22 years. This May, we've been in Norwood since 1994. We bought our house from the lunch lady of Allison School, who had grown up there, or her husband had grown up there. So we fell in love with the house and have worked very, very hard over the past 22 years to restore it to its original state. And we take a lot of pride in our house. We take a lot of pride in our street. We take a lot of pride in our neighbors. We were very excited when the plans were announced for the condo complex in the church and the school. We were thrilled. It was a great plan, and it was rather heartbreaking when it fell apart for us. So when the woman representing the developer met my wife was so excited because the plan seemed so, someone bought the property, they're going to do something with it after all, it's going to be great. And she even showed her the plans that we had obtained for the condo complex. And so then when I attended the hearing earlier, the previous hearing, I was kind of shocked to see how ill-prepared they were. The head of the company didn't even bother to show up, and the fact that they didn't even know that it was for sale was pretty stunning. I really do. To me, they were just looking for a quick, easy way to make a profit at our expense, especially at my neighbor's expense. And everyone loves biomedical research, the next flu vaccine. There are a lot of companies that are doing the same thing. And there's nothing that I've seen that means that their vaccine is going to be any more effective than any other, or if it would even get picked up for production or approved by the FDA. So there are many other places where a biomedical facility can go. I don't understand why they would pick an old historic church and a school. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and I strongly urge the council to reject the change. It's not worth the impact that it would have on our neighbor. It could potentially be devastating for them and really detrimental to our street. Their plans just aren't fluid, and their plans aren't fleshed out enough. What if the biomedical company pulls out? What do we have then? There's not enough certainty. There's not enough they haven't done enough due diligence, and they haven't eased my or any of my neighbors' concerns. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to add a question.
Yes, sir.
Something I heard from a letter I got, and then you kind of mentioned it. It seemed like the first time that same group spoke about plans for a residential area, and then somewhere over the course of a year, that same group changed strategy. So just to be very clear, it was both the owner and the representative. They were the same people that showed it sounds like a bunch of residents, a residential operation, and then that same group of people changed the strategy. Is that correct?
I don't think anything was produced to describe what a residential development would look like. The plans that we had were from the previous from the previous developer. These people came to us with nothing. They bought the building as like I said, the woman spoke to my wife, but she said they didn't seem to know exactly what they wanted to do with it. Possible incubator space, etc.
Okay.
So
So they bought it from someone who originally planned to have it as a residential space. They bought it thinking, potentially, yeah, that sounds right. And then over the course of a year, it sounds like, kind of zoned in on this, this commercial idea with the biomedical thing, right?
that's
what it seems like?
Yes.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Anything else you'd like to answer?
No, I think that's all I have to say. Again, we love Norwood. We take a lot of pride in where we live. Great location, great place to live, and we want to see it move forward, but not this. I don't think that this is the right way that'll serve me and our neighbors. So, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Real quick, Mr. Brady.
This is for my own personal, I just want to know this personally. I don't want to be incendiary, or I don't want to seem like I'm like poking, but, and it's been said that these people were professional and well-spoken. Do you believe they were being honest when they came do you believe they were being honest? I mean, this is just...
Well, my wife met the woman. I did not. All I know is from the previous hearing, when they appeared so ill-prepared, the fact that the woman did not know that the property was for sale, that just doesn't bode well for me. So I can't speak to how she carried herself or anything like that. I trust my wife's opinion, and she seemed to like the woman. But at the same time, this was so, they were just so ill-prepared. I just don't necessarily buy what they're selling.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
She's over there flagging. She might have something to add here.
I think she will.
We can allow that. Please, I'd like to hear.
Did you get up here since he kept on saying my wife spoke to her?
Please state your name and address.
My name's Sue Balistreri.
I'm sorry, can you spell your last name for me, please?
B as in boy, Alistreri.
R-E-R-I. Okay, thank you.
Sue. Question down there. I don't know if you realize that originally there was a big plan for the school, the Baptist Church, and Allison, the two buildings of Allison, to be a big development.
Yeah,
Super
I just talked
modern.
to somebody today, it was the first time I
It was awesome. So, you know, basically that was 2 schools and 2 churches. It was a great plan. We actually know the realtor. He was showing people the plots. They were going to save the outsides of all the buildings. They were going to be completely done because, of course, they're all asbestos. It was going to be a great thing. Separate driveways and parking lots for each building. They went to the detail of picking the plants. There was an iron gate around the whole thing. It was beautiful. There was all different sizes of apartments. Some 2 stories, some single, some small, some large. Prices starting at 80 up. So there was a lot of opportunity for all kinds of people to own property in these beautiful historic buildings. They weren't going to change the outside. They were going to add a few floors onto a couple of them. It was going to be super professional, sidewalks all around, dog park. It was nice. We were super excited, and that's why it all got turned to residential zoning, because it was a school, 2 schools and 2 churches before. This, when she, you know, I was out working in the yard, and she came over and said, do you want to see inside? This is what I want to do. And basically, she was talking about her company, and they're, you know, developing this cure. And when I spoke to her, there's just a few people in her company. Basically, their idea was to sell off space to other similar companies. But that's just nothing they had planned. It's just the fact that they bought a giant school and a giant church, and there were just a few people in their company. What's going on with that? It doesn't really add up. She walked me through, showed me the stage. The owner's a real big art fan. We're going to make this into a gallery. And, you know, we're going to turn this room into, people can have weddings in, you know, a party space. You know, she just went from space to space and was just kind of throwing ideas out. None of it really adds up. And then when we went to the meeting and then found out that the thing was for sale, I'm like, all right, they're just flipping it, because originally the property, I think, was for sale for the longest time for like $1 million. So they got it for half that price, you know, and I think they just thought they could flip it. It wasn't a plan at all. Basically, there was just her boss, a few people that would take one small space, and she walked me through. They put carpet, a little bit of paint, but all the rest of the space, they were going to rent it out. So, you know, we would be at the mercy of the landlord across the street, and they could rent that space out to anybody. Any kind of business could go in there. It's a residential street. As Cleon said, when we first moved in, there were 3 houses at the top of the street, across the street from where he lives, and they were taken out because of the medical practice on the corner. They put a big parking lot behind it, and the big parking lot building wasn't big enough, and so they needed a big parking lot adding to that. And all that's gone now. That whole medical practice is up the street at Xavier, but we did lose 3 houses on the street for Progress. They gave into Progress. The houses are gone. These houses were built, ours is 1911. Pretty much the whole street was built at that time. Those houses are gone. There's an empty parking lot and an empty parking garage There's a media school there now. So, you know, people can come up with ideas of, this is progress. The fact that it was going to be these wonderful residents was great. Norwood has too many renters. This would add to our tax base. People owning property in Norwood puts people having a stronger stake in the schools, and we love that. But having flaky landlords across the street selling out chip-chopped rooms, it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for our street, and I don't think that we should say, oh, okay, no one's doing anything with it, let's just go with it. Cross our fingers. They haven't proved anything but negative. I showed her the plan. She says, oh, this is great. Can I borrow it? And she took it, and she's never returned it, and I've called her a couple times for it. So then I thought, well, if she kept it and they turned it into the condos, that would be great. I'd be fine with it. But I think they're flakes. You asked me what I feel about people. My husband was very polite. I'll tell you honestly, I think they're flakes. So.
I appreciate your honesty.
All right. Anything else?
I have one comment.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. President. So you're talking about this lady and her company. We're not talking about the same people that actually came up with this. So the plans that you are talking about and gave to her were made by the previous people. And that's the one who, because
it was a developer.
There was a bad situation that went on there that I remember, right?
So apparently, it was a financing thing. The person that came up with the plan had redone other sort of industrial buildings and made them into condos. This was a big plan, and it was nice. Like I said, they were going to keep the buildings, separate parking lots, in angles, separate entrances, so they were even paying attention to the flow of traffic. And the buildings are beautiful. If they stay empty too long, they're going to just end up being torn down. I mean, CDC, is it? CCD down in OTR? You know, all those buildings were empty forever, and just that huge, because they were empty forever, I thought, okay, for sure, they're going to have to tear this stuff down. And a big developer came in, and now, you know, we have this wonderful thing in Cincinnati. So this was a smaller scale, but the idea of this whole development of condos was somebody else's idea. Matt Commissar was selling it, and the developer, at first, we went to several meetings with him. I think the story is that he couldn't get his funding. He could only get it to, at least he told us, we were told, he could only get it funded to be apartments, which would be a waste of time. Why would you build these nice spaces and then just have them apartments that are going to get trashed? It was about them being condos, so people would own property, all different price points, so it was open to a lot of people that live in Norwood, have giant houses, and maybe wanted to stay here, and they could have a smaller space, and it was all new, all modern, great layout. It was a good thing for a lot of different types of people. There were high-end to low-end. It was just being done well, but that was somebody else that did that. This group, that fell through, so the building, all the buildings went back up for sale, and no one bought the two schools at Allison, and then the Baptist church and the school space was purchased by this group. So they had no prior plan of turning it into condos. They didn't even apparently check the zoning when they bought it. They just thought it was a cool building, and now they're kind of stuck with it. So anyhow.
Thanks for the clarity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? No? We have everyone that would like to speak has spoken, so we will close the public hearing, and we will move on to item I-1. Item I-1 is an ordinance denying the request for a zone change and the placement of a planned unit development district over 2037 Cortland, 2041 Cortland, 2045 Cortland, 2049 Cortland, 2038 Weir, 2042 Weir, and 2046 Weir. Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move that we have suspend the rules, have all three readings of this ordinance, and pass it.
Motion by Mr. Kelch to suspend the rules, have all three readings. Mr. Gabbard.
I second that.
Second by Mr. Gabbard. Any discussion? Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this has been something that's been on my radar a little while now, and I would like to start by thanking Mr. Montgomery for having me over to his home to show me the findings that he had, to discuss this issue, and I was able to see his home as well as some of the surrounding homes, as well as parts of the property that is asking to be rezoned. What appears to me is we have a property that has to be rezoned. It was already denied by the zoning board. We heard from a couple residents just now about how they didn't seem too prepared and they seemed kind of sloppy and unprofessional. I was able to look over some of the things, and what they're asking compared to what they have is, to me, it doesn't add up. What this would essentially do is take these residences of longtime residents in Norwood, and it would make them non-conforming properties, which would be very hard for them to move and then sell their property. If something happened to their property, say there was a fire and it had to be rebuilt, they would have to conform to the new zoning requirements, which would put them out of a home essentially. So that doesn't sit well with me. As the Ward 1 rep, this going in there does not sit well. I don't want to see any residents displaced or have hard time getting any sort of return on their investment of Norwood for a long time. We're probably going to hear some people talk about economic development and that kind of thing. And I agree, there should be some economic development there in Norwood. I think it would be a great place to hold some things. And I think it would be a great place to improve and start to improve Norwood. But I think there's a right way to do it. And to me, rezoning these properties without offering these residents any kind of fair market value on their property would just be a disservice. I would like to see something go there, but not on the backs of our residents. I think it's important to look at this and be a little, I think we're all smart enough to understand that we do need some economic development, but we can't let a company come in and take advantage of a hurting city. Okay, we will have economic development, we will spur growth. I just don't think jumping into this situation and rezoning this property, which will affect other residential properties, is even close to the right way to go about this. So I would ask, as your Ward 1 rep, that everybody vote yes on turning this down. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Mr. DiNardo.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Chris. And thanks for those who came and talked. I think today and yesterday was admittedly the most amount of time I had kind of looking into this problem. And yeah, like I think a lot of us are going to arrived at the same conclusion potentially, that there's a lot of limited information, strategy seems to change, and they kind of explained, the residents kind of explained a lot of that backstory. So this probably won't pass, or it won't pass. I'll probably lean towards staying with the denial. But I do think it presents an opportunity, and there's kind of two lenses that I'm looking through this problem. The first is, in the future, not necessarily this particular ownership group, but how would we encourage developers to bring their plans to the Planning Commission or us prior to purchase? And I know they can, but that's a pretty long time cycle. And so I wonder if, just as part of our economic mindset, the Economic Development Committee, us as leaders, try to figure out ways, and I'm kind of thinking through this on the fly, how to encourage that sort of process. When someone has a plan, maybe even a big plan, come bring it forward especially before buying, because that sort of prevents this kind of silliness that we've got here where they bought it and now they're trying to figure out what they're doing with it ahead of time. That's just not a recipe for success. So that's the first thing, is maybe either discussion or at least a thoughtfulness or thought process amongst ourselves on how to encourage that pre-purchase planning mindset. And then the second opportunity I think it presents is, with this space in particular, it is very attractive looking from the outside, and it is something that will continue to stay empty, I think, for a little while, unless we try to target the potential buyers towards this. So I don't really want to help this particular company just rezone and get rid of it, and so that's why we're probably going to, I encourage all of us to continue to deny that. But I still think myself and all of us should be talking to the current owners, because if they're not going to put something in there that's going to be attractive, can we help them put together a strategy that either encourages them to do something about it or encourages them to help sell it to someone who will? And so I think it is a little bit of an obligation or responsibility as us as city leaders to kind of meet, speak with, and build out a plan to use that space in the near term. So I encourage all of us to contact with them and see what we can do about that.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to again thank the residents that came to speak. They've come to speak. They've been to the previous one, they've been to this one. So I am glad to hear that there's at least some support for going ahead and denying it. And just want to mention some of the other benefits of denying. So let's just say they do want to still come back to Planning Commission. By denying it, they would have to reapply. And by reapplying, it means that the residents will get another notice of a public hearing at the Planning Commission. I think right now they just want to somehow go back to the new Planning Commission that's here now and represent their plan. But at that point, then the residents might not necessarily be notified. And I feel like denying it also just, again, it sends a message to the residents that, we've listened to you, you've come twice. If they want to try to redo it, they should reapply. It's my opinion on that. It's actually kind of interesting, it was mentioned a couple of times about the housing, and I think the housing was a wonderful plan if it would have been able to work. And it was a previous owner, not the current owner. So the current owners bought it in late 2018. The housing was, at least in the church, was before that. And the people that actually were proposing the housing at the church, they had a long-term contract to buy with the church. So the current owners actually bought it from the church. The church was never marketing it for housing. They had an agreement that if they could probably get so many pre-sales of condos that they would end up buying it. But work can absolutely be done to help a new buyer even before they actually buy it. So I think Mr. DiNardo's point's well made. I think the Economic Development Committee, would be a great place to continue that discussion. But I did want to say that I am going to support the motion to do all three readings, and if that passes, I'm going to support the ordinance. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Anyone else? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for Mr. Moore, if I may. So they come to the Planning Commission and they want a zoning commission and they want to change the zoning law in that area. Why? Can you explain to me why these homes are included? Is it just the area and it has to be that area? Why are these homes included in this type of zoning change?
The idea of zoning is we separate different uses. So we put commercial over here and residential over here and manufacturing over there, so they're not all mixed together, and so that there isn't negative outflows from the commercial into the residential areas. And so if you want to have zone this commercial, the idea is it should be connected to other commercial areas. And if you just did the school and the church and zone those commercial, what you'd have then is a couple of houses as residential all on their own, in their own little spot. And that is frowned upon in zoning. And so that's kind of the approach. What you do is you want to, in order to make it work zoning-wise, you have the zones encompass all of the same stuff together. You don't have little islands here and there. And you can run into trouble legally with spot zoning if you end up going too far in that direction. And our zoning code does not allow for PUD. It's got to match the underlying code, and you can't, and it's just some peculiarities of our code. There could be changes to the underlying code for a PUD overlay that in theory could be done that would allow kind of a commercial in this spot, but we're not there. So and that's why they did it that way. Is that it should connect. If we're going to make this commercial, it should be a part of the commercial on Montgomery Road that's, 50, 60, 70 feet away.
So can I follow up?
Yes, sir.
So let's just say that we're okay and this passes. Let's just, hypothetically, this passes and this zoning change occurs. What does that mean for those houses? Because I've already heard what they think it means, but I'd like to hear from the law department. What does that mean for those houses when they go to sell it? Does that, in my eyes, it potentially would create more equity for their homes, so in other words, when they sell their house, the next person that buys it has to do a business in that home, or can they buy that house for residential in that zoning area?
Generally, if you have a non-conforming use, you can keep using that use that violates the zoning for as long as you're using that use. But if it's vacant for 6 months, if it burns down, it'll be hard to sell, certainly if you want to sell it to a homeowner. I mean, it's going to be hard to do that. It will be, people will look at it as a business. It'll just be zoned for the wrong thing. And that's a problem. If you live there and you just want to, I want to be, this is my house, this is where I live. You don't want to be in a non-conforming, you don't want to be a non-conforming use.
Well, that makes it simple. That makes it simple. I mean, to me, it's simple. I mean, there's no plan here. If they had a plan and we had, so basically they want us to change the zoning and whatever happens, happens. Like, let's throw the coin up. So, to me, that's simple. So, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Anyone else? Mr. Gabbard.
Yeah, I want to thank the residents for coming tonight. I had a great conversation today with Mr. Montgomery. For the mere fact alone, by approving this zone change, we tell these residents of all these properties, we don't care about you. We're only worried about, other business, and we don't care about your property values, because their property values will sink. That's just a given. They would lose their property values, and like the law director stated, who's going to buy a house in that? So for that point alone, I support denying this, and I hope we have all support to deny this. But if you look at this particular company, Mr. DiNardo, I mean, I kind of agree with, we want to help people that want to come here and start businesses. But this business came before last year to this council, and it came before the Planning Commission, and they make it sound like they're a big business, a big developer. And the residents even spoke that they didn't seem like they were very organized. Well, if you look up the zoning application that they put in for the Zoning Board of Appeals with the meeting with the Planning Commission back in October, the address of which they list, if you pull that address up, it's a house, just a regular, look like a farmhouse. That doesn't really seem like a big type business to me. If you look at this, if you look up this Blue Water Real Estate out of Connecticut, that comes to a UPS address. That seems a little shady. They put this submission in on, looks like October 17th to meet before the Planning Commission, but yet they bumped the price up $100,000. It was listed last April for $550,000. So then in October, they bump it up $100,000 either the same day or the day after they apply for a zoning change. And now it's just been reduced again, so it's still on the market. I mean, if you go to the Simply Klein and do a search of properties, it's still listed, it's still for sale. So, I mean, that doesn't even make sense. If they're trying to do a business here, something don't jive. They even kind of miss misrepresent themselves, misrepresent this property on this Sipsey Klein advertisement that if you pull it up and you look on here, if you look, it says like current building usage, business, it says, you know, actually let me pull the, on the actual site, business district, commercial area, freestanding, multi-tenant, residential. It's not a business district. It's not a commercial area. And that's the way that they've got it listed for sale. This is a shady operation here. Operation. I don't know what they're trying to pull, but they're not going to pull it over on this council. Thank you.
Mr. Miracle.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. DiNardo.
Thanks for that. That was good detective work. My comment was more to say, I only want someone here that wants to be here. And I think we all do. Like if you want to be in Norwood, if you want to start a business, even if you had a really great plan that residents could buy in and to warrant changing this to more of a commercial property, maybe there's a world that exists in. It's more likely that a residential space or keep using it in its current zoning probably sounds like a better move. But the point is, I don't want this to sit on the market for 10 years with a company that doesn't really care that much more than trying to get some of their investment back. So it's really like, if you're not planning on being here long term and you've got all this shadiness going on, maybe our involvement can help them shape how they get out of this mess that that's a mess that they're in.
Yeah.
How to get out of this mess and get someone in here who wants to work with us, wants to work with you guys, and maybe you end up either back where you had 3 years ago when you had some pretty good plans in front of you, or maybe something new that none of us thought of that we can get excited about again. I just don't want it to get stuck like a lot of our buildings are sometimes. So,
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Gabbard.
Just to follow up on that, when I brought that point up that you had made, I didn't mean that in a negative way. What I meant to say was, a company that portrays themselves to be a big developer and a big company like this would do their due diligence to know that they can't just come in and buy this and then they're going to suddenly change all these people's property values by changing the zoning. They didn't do their due diligence because it's a shady operation here. So but I do agree, we as a city want to do whatever we can to help, because we want that economic development. We would like to see something. The residents themselves even say, we would like to see something in there that's good for Norwood. That's what we want to do. That's what we as a council, as the city itself, we need to be working to do whatever we can to help spur these businesses and help them through the process. But something like this, shame on them.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to comment to both of you. I appreciate both the comments, and I'm your biggest proponent when it comes to helping. I don't want to see anybody come in here and have a hard time when it comes to business and trying to move forward with their business plan. I think that's not where we should be. We should be helping people, and I think that's where your comment lies, that we should be helping people, and I agree with that 100%, but I thought you were spot on. I couldn't say it any better. So I think that what you said was true. I think both of you were exactly spot on. When the right thing happens, we will be for it, and I don't think this is it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Anyone else? Further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Kelch, a second by Mr. Gabbard to suspend the rules and have all three readings for an ordinance denying the request for a zone change and the placement of planned unit development district over 2037 Cortland, 2041 Cortland, 2045 Cortland, 2049 Cortland, 2038 Weir, 2042 Weir, and 2046 Weir. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings, please?
Ordinance denying the request for a zone change and the placement of a planned unit development district over 2037 Cortland, 2041 Cortland, 2045 Cortland, 2049 Cortland, 2038 Wire, 2042 wire, and 2046 wire. Ordinance denying the request for a zone change and the placement of a planned unit development district over 2037 Cortland, 2041 Cortland, 2045 Cortland, 2049 Cortland, 2038 wire, 2042 wire, and 2046 wire. Ordinance denying the request for a zone change and the placement of a planned unit development district over 2037 Cortland, 2041 Cortland, 2045 Cortland, 2049 Cortland, 2038 wire, 2042 wire, and 2046 wire.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard.
Make a motion that we pass this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Bonzo.
I'd like to second.
Second by Mr. Bonzo. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Discussion.
I said discussion, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I was getting ahead of myself. Go ahead.
No, I don't have any discussion, so we'll make sure you offered it.
Any discussion?
We need to flip rules.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item I2, which that point is mute, so we'll move on.
You want a motion to remove it from the agenda or a motion to table it?
Yeah.
But
That's what I wanted to ask you. What,
Yeah, so,
Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to remove item I2 from the agenda.
motion by Mr. Bonzo to remove I2 from the agenda? Mr. Braden? Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Item I2 is removed from the agenda. Moving on, item J, request to address council. I do not have any request to address council this evening. Item K, reports on standing committees of council. We don't have any reports this evening. Item L, third readings of ordinances and resolutions. We don't have any this evening. Moves us on to item M. M1 is the ordinance authorizing the adoption of an alternate method of apportioning the local government fund. This is the second reading.
I have a comment.
Mr. DiNardo.
For this committee, I'd like to make a motion that we actually have the second and the third. I know that we're trying, some are shaking heads, you already know? Good, so I don't need to explain it too much, but for those on TV, this was really more of a timing thing. If we rewind ourselves back about a month and a half, we had the first reading, and the title is authorizing the adoption of an alternative method of apportioning to local government. Said slightly differently, this is approving the methodology of the commission that divides up our county apportionment. Jim Stith, our auditor, needs to get back with our approval of that methodology here in about a week or two. So there's probably not enough time, or it'd be very pressured for us to do what we wanted to do, which was the first, second, and third reading. So I just kind of want us, my motion is to have the second, the third, and encouraging us to vote.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Motion, Mr. Geraci?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mr. Geraci. So the motion is to have the second and third reading.
Yes, please.
Any further discussion? Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. President. So yeah, echoing everything that Mr. DiNardo just said, we have to get this done before the end of the month. I think it's actually a really very soon deadline. The other thing is that there's a lot of thought that went into this back when this formula was initially done. From my understanding, it's not altering the formula whatsoever. It's the same that's already in place today. So it's complicated and complex and full of politics of how this formula came about. But either way, it's here. The municipalities have agreed on it over the years, and we're basically just saying, hey, we're okay to keep doing it. So I'm supportive of it.
Any further discussion? The motion on the floor by Mr. DiNardo. We have a second by Mr. Geraci to have the second and third reading of the ordinance authorizing the adoption of an alternate method of apportioning the local government fund. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have the second and third reading?
Ordinance authorizing the adoption of an alternative method of apportioning the local government fund. Ordinance authorizing the adoption of an alternative method of apportioning the local government fund.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to pass the ordinance. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The ordinance passes. Moving on to item N1, ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operation of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio. Mr. Geraci.
Make a motion to have first reading.
Motion by Mr. Geraci to have the first reading. Mr. Bonsall.
I'd like to second.
Second by Mr. Bonsall to have the first reading. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to know where this came from, or who requested it.
Let's see. That was Mayor Schneider. Mayor Schneider, sir.
I did request it, yes.
Yes, Mayor Schneider
I'd
requested.
like to go through the chair to the mayor and just ask maybe why.
Yes, sir. Mayor Schneider, sir.
Thank you, I'm glad you asked that question, because I ride my bike in the city of Norwood, and a lot of times I will ride over to my sister's house, which is over on Slane Avenue, and then we will go across Spencer over to the Wasson Way. And as we cross some of these streets that are four-way stops, there's probably 8 blocks where there's four-way stops, where we would have to stop each and every time when there's no cars and no traffic coming. And I would like to keep the momentum up on my bicycle and be able to look both directions and make sure it's clear, and then proceed through that stop sign. The way our ordinances are set right now, me as the mayor, I should not be going through every one of those stop signs as a rolling on my bicycle. So what this does is give me the ability to come up to that intersection, and if there are no vehicles there and it's clear, I can continue on through that intersection. But it clearly defines in the ordinance that you must have the clear right-of-way, and that you do stop. If there are other vehicles at that stop sign, then you have to stop. But if there are not, it gives a bicyclist the ability to continue to keep his momentum up. This is something that was passed in Idaho years and years ago, and that's why it's called the Idaho law. So it was put in place so that bicyclists, and we have a large amount of bicyclists that are doing that right now, that cruise right through them. So this just makes it more appropriate, and if a police officer sees you, as long as you're doing it cautiously, you're allowed to proceed through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm definitely excited to see this ordinance on the agenda. There's other states besides Idaho that have adopted it, which is exciting. I think that Norwood having adopted this, I think it'll, potentially send a good message for the city that, hey, like, we're looking at things like this and being more progressive. Essentially, this is how, most bicyclists ride anyways. When I ride my bicycle, when I'm approaching a stop sign, I essentially, I'm cruising to the stop sign, looking both ways to make sure that, there's nobody coming, and I'm going to proceed forward. You're not in a car, so that you can see and hear things much better than you would if you were in a car. And you're also, in a very small vehicle, I guess, on the road versus a half-ton car, and so you're not going to go out and just bike out in front of a car. And so essentially, it just kind of makes legal what most people do anyways. And so I'm kind of excited that we're just going to get this done, and I'm definitely going to support the first reading today.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Geraci, a second by Mr. Bonsall to have the first reading of the ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operation of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Sure.
Mrs. Williams.
Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance 373.01D to adopt the Idaho law as it pertains to the operation of bicycles in the city of Norwood, Ohio.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item N2, ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. Mr. DiNardo.
Yep. I have a motion to actually have all three readings, and wanted to give a little bit of background on what these appropriation changes were. Two of the big ones are moving from the general fund over to the street fund, and so this is some of that landscaping we talked about in February. You saw a similar item. And so fast forward 2 months, it's kind of the same thing. It's just reclassifying to make sure that the appropriations are funding the right places and that they match the plan, which is the most important part. There also is a special assessment in there called, which is listed in the Norwood Energy SPA. So I just kind of wanted to give, if anybody has any questions on these, they can bring it up, but it's really just landscaping.
We have a motion by Mr. DiNardo to suspend the rules, have all three readings. May I have a second? Mr. Braden?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Do we have any discussion? We have a motion by Mr. DiNardo, second by Mr. Braden, to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. Please call the roll, Mrs. Williams.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. May we have all three readings?
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2020 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. DiNardo.
I'd like to pass. Motion
Mr.
passes.
DiNardo, would like to make a motion? Mr. Thompson. Second. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item N3, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract to re-roof the Norwood Fire Department building at 4725 Montgomery Road and declaring an emergency. Mr. Gabbard.
I'd like to make a motion that we have all three readings.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard, have all three readings. Mr. Geraci.
Second the motion.
Second by Mr. Geraci. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Just to clarify, this is I don't know who this would be for, probably the mayor, I guess, or the chief, either one. This is for the whole roof, not just a repair, but the whole roof.
Mr. Steiner.
Well, I'd like to defer to the chief. If we could have our fire chief, Tom McCabe, who is our fire chief now, not our assistant chief, he is our fire chief. If we could have him take the microphone and talk, because he's done a lot of legwork on this, and he's probably the best resource. Chief McCabe, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. So what you have in front of you is kind of the end result of legwork that I did in terms of trying to get some roof repair estimates for the firehouse. What we've decided to do is we'll completely re-roof all the flat surfaces. That firehouse is an odd design, so it has upwards of 7 different flat roof surfaces. they'll get completely torn off and redone. And then on the metal deck roof, that's going to get a repair in terms of it's going to get a custom polymer seal. And actually, we thought it's a financial reason. It's significantly less expensive. It comes with a 10-year warranty, and it gives us time to really evaluate the fire station in terms of, is it still an effective use? It's really expensive to replace that metal decking. I think the initial estimates was upwards of $400,000 just for the metal. And the initial estimate on the polymer coating with the 10-year warranty was 80, maybe. I'm spitballing the numbers. You know, this project's really important. This roof, I have documentation in my office that was sent to previous administrations of it leaking since 2004. This city has 2 buildings that are in operation 24/7, 365. That'd be the police station and the fire station. I know the mayor has seen it. I know some of the council people have seen it. The main dormitory is where we have some of our largest leaks. And I've asked the health department to come over and evaluate it. The building department wanted to write orders on it. And I said, well, we're working towards getting this done. I'd like to have it done yesterday, but I understand that there's a legal process when you start spending taxpayer dollars in that kind of volume. So it's really important to get this done out to bid so we can get it repaired.
Any questions? Mr. Boswell.
Yeah, I had a question, I think to the law director, but I mean, essentially this ordinance, one concern I have is just that it's a bid and enter into a contract. And there's no dollar limit in the ordinance, meaning it does say the lowest bid, but I guess there's no dollar limit in there that kind of protects if the lowest bid's double the amount that was estimated, then there's council's already approved it. Like, the mayor can just enter into the contract. So is this how we've normally done these? I know that we did the city hall roof that way, but I just didn't know if this is a typical thing in general.
It kind of depends. I mean, some things the council authorizes to advertise for bids and enter a contract. For other things, it's authorized to advertise for bids and then come back for council to approve the contract. Partly it depends on the finances. I'm going to assume if it's significantly more than what the estimate is, it would be a question of amending the financial recovery plan. I don't know. I mean, that would be really the question, is whether there's money appropriated for it.
Gotcha. Well, I think there's multiple projects or multiple capital dollars there. So, I mean, potentially they could still do it. And I mean, I trust that if it's significantly over, it'll come back. I'm going to support it today, but I do think that in general, we should really look, in my opinion, I'd like to look at this a little bit more when it comes to just ensuring that the proper protections are in place, whether there's a dollar amount in here that if it exceeds this amount, the lowest bid exceeds this amount, it comes back to council, or just having it come back to council when the bids come in. So just wanted to make that noted, but I will be still supporting it today.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah. It's funny, when I originally raised my hand, I was going to say, well, it's in the plan. And you addressed that. But actually, that is a pretty good idea that I think not in this case, because a couple of us, you're right, we have been in there, and if you're just in the dorms, you feel the water on your face. So it's beyond, it is an emergency in this case. But great point, and I think that maybe a way that we address that point is we separate them. I know this one's an emergency, but maybe you actually brought it up like 2 months ago now I think about it. Separating the authorization of bids from the making of the contract. This way, exactly that thing happens. We're able to see some of the process for these over $100,000, let's say, we start to see that. So maybe that's a number that we hold as the threshold. It was a good thought process there.
Thank
But
you,
sorry, I wanted to clarify for those on TV. We actually did, the $125,000 that's in the capital improvements plan is based on, at the time, 2 bids, I believe. So of the 3 that were required, that's where there was some logic, and they were halfway through the process at the time of that number being arrived at. So just so you guys know.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question on the actual bids and the actual product. the flat roofing that we're speaking of, are we talking like a rubberized membrane that we're going to put down?
Correct.
And then I would assume the metal work, you said a polymer seal?
Correct.
And I would assume the metal is probably not awful. You could probably repair some spots, but it just lasts longer than it would last longer. But anyway, can you explain about the polymer seal?
Sure. So we requested 4 different roofing companies to come out. We had 2 show up, Holland Roofing and Deer Park. Holland was the only one that provided a secondary option in terms of the metal deck roofing. That's original. That firehouse was built in 1974. Like many things in this city, the amount of deferred maintenance that's been put off on city-owned property is astronomical, and you're seeing the effects of that. What the polymer does is it buys us time. There are some sections in the metal roof that may need some repair prior to the polymer going on, but essentially it seals it, and it gives us a minute R factor in terms of insulation. I did make the mayor aware that the initial quote, that roof will be white instead of the tinner's red, which in summertime may not be a bad thing, because that apparatus bay gets hot from baking from the sun, from that dark color. But the fact that we can get 10 years additional lifespan out of that metal roof with a warranty that if it leaks, we can call them back, I think that's a wise use of taxpayer dollars to further solidify that fire station and keep the guys dry. It's a shame that you go to bed at night and have a rainstorm and wake up with your bedding soaked. And we've got beds moved all over the place in those dorms. And it's not just one leak. I think last count we have 26 separate leaks in that fire station. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Bonson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to ask, I know that Chief McCabe had hinted at this, that they were looking at this, but I mean, what is the reasonable lifespan of that building to continue to be used as a fire station? Like, how long do you think it has left?
So there's a number of considerations. You talk about firehouse use. When that firehouse was built, it is built with all males only in the fire service in mind. When we hire a female, we're going to have massive, massive upgrades to that firehouse. I think in terms of when the city contracted Dr. Kramer to come in and look at the fire department, I was the one that assisted him in the facility outlook. I think the building serves us and serves us well. It's well built. It's properly placed in terms of getting to areas within the city. And our average response time is 3.5 minutes, pretty much anywhere in the city. It does have its challenges in terms of the amount of electrical equipment we utilize, in terms of computers, data network cables. That's been a struggle, but we've overcome that. On average, they say nowadays 50 years is the lifespan of a firehouse. I would suggest that with proper maintenance, this firehouse should be able to serve in its current location for at least 2 more decades, if not longer. But realize that when we finally hire a female, we're going to have some expenses to accommodate that.
Any other for Mr. Bonson?
So it sounds like the lifespan of the building is going to exceed or be about the same as the lifespan of the roof, so that makes a lot of sense then to move forward. I mean, maybe the mayor, if you want.
Mayor Steiner.
I would like to just add, the servers for the city are downstairs in the basement of the firehouse. The biggest problem is all the transitions within the firehouse on the roof also. The water's flowing so many different ways, and there's so many different surfaces that it has to transition to. That's another reason why this becomes a little bit more of a complicated roofing project. It's a beautiful building, 74, we were all proud of it when it was put in, but it has seen a lot of service, it's provided a lot of service. I think passing this is another step in the right direction, just like protecting City Hall. We've got some critical equipment that we protect inside that firehouse, not just all the fire equipment and the firefighters, but we also have, I don't know if you've been in the basement, there's a large server room down there. There's a lot of technology that we have to take care of there too. So passing this is important so we can keep keep that stuff in place and in good shape.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Anyone else? Thank you, Chief McCabe.
Thank you for your time.
We have a motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Geraci, to suspend the rules. An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract to re-roof the Norwood Fire Department building at 4725 Montgomery Road and declaring an emergency. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract to re-roof the Norwood Fire Department building at 4725 Montgomery Road and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract to re-roof the Norwood Fire Department building at 4725 Montgomery Road and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract to re-roof the Norwood Fire Department building at 4725 Montgomery Road and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Gabbard.
Make a motion, we pass it, the ordinance?
Motion by Mr. Gabbard to pass the ordinance. Mr. Geraci.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Mr. Geraci. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item N4, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase a rebuilt 2013 Elgin street sweeper and declaring an emergency. Mr. Geraci.
I'd like to first ask, one, why we're putting this in as declaring an emergency. I think this, maybe this is something that we have 3 readings on because we get some specs for the equipment that we're looking to purchase. I thought initially that this was a brand-new street sweeper. Apparently it's not. I didn't get much information on it, so I'd like to see more information before we do all 3 readings, to be honest. I mean, I don't know how we can go about, to be honest. Being new, I don't know how we can go about amending that.
Mr. Bonsall.
I just wanted to note just the difference between the 3 readings and declaring an emergency. So the declaring an emergency just means that, I mean, we can do 1 reading and still have declaring an emergency. It just means that it goes into effect immediately after passage.
I understand that,
And
Mr.
then,
Bonzel.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you could still leave it and do 3 readings. You could amend the agenda, or you could amend it, what have you. But just want to make sure that was noted that they were 2 separate things.
Mr. Geraci.
Just to respond to Mr. Bonzel, I understand what declaring an emergency means, sir. As I explained earlier in the week here, somewhere else, but, you know, I don't think we need to have all 3 readings tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Do we have a motion? Mr. Thompson?
Motion, we have the first reading.
Mr. Thompson makes a motion to have the first reading. Mr. Geraci.
Second the motion.
Second motion to have the first reading.
I can actually answer the question why it's drafted that way.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you. From my understanding is that the Service Safety Director has discovered that there's a city that's getting rid of a used street sweeper for a fifth of what a new one costs, something like that. And if that's the reason, is that, oh, we should move on this, and that's why the law department drafted it as with an emergency clause, the idea that being we should move on it quickly. The other side of that, though, is that because the cost is more than what the Service Safety Director can just buy on his own initiative, and because of the type of equipment it is, there are procedures. So with the roof for the firehouse, the idea was to advertise for bids. Somebody's selling it, so I don't know, we don't know at this point if they are having a bidding, like doing an auction to sell it. But we can't just say, we're going to buy this $60,000 piece of equipment because they said it was a good deal and it's used. There's, again, the protections for the taxpayers. So I'm not sure, but the sooner, I think on behalf of the Service Safety Director, the sooner we pass this, the more likely we are, if that procedure is available, to get this equipment. If we wait 6 weeks, that may not happen.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Geraci?
I understand the urgency that might be there. The problem is I still don't have any specs on what we're looking to buy. I mean, we're looking at buying a rebuilt piece of equipment that we still may have to repair a year from now. So, you know, I'd like to see something before we actually vote on putting money out there.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Mr. Gabbard?
Thank you, Mr. President. In Section 1, it gives you the whole specs. The mileage, the year, the make, the model, how many hours it's got, everything like that. I'd like to go through the chair to the mayor and see if he'd like to speak on this.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Yeah, the street sweeper that we have right now is out of service. The box is destroyed, and we can put about $35,000 or $40,000 into rebuilding the street sweeper that we have, but that's really not a good investment. This street sweeper is a different type of street sweeper. It's one that the public superintendent of public works would like to get. It is, as Mr. Moore said, it's about $60,000 or $65,000 is my understanding. Anything over $50,000 we have to come to the city or to council to look for, right? So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is that this street sweeper is available now, and we can get a street sweeper back on the road for this summer. A new street sweeper is going to run probably $120,000, over $100,000.
Clint said,
What
sorry,
is it, Mr.
I'll
Denari? What number were you given?
Yeah, it was like 165 is what Clint said, and that was for the style that we didn't even really want that much.
Yeah, so in essence, we're trying to save some money, put a street sweeper on the street, and we're trying to capture a deal, as Mr. Moore stated. But you know, it's really up to council to approve it or not approve it. I don't know. I didn't really look at the specs, and I have not seen the street sweeper. I left that up to the superintendent of public works and the safety service director who have been working on this. So I know they wouldn't bring it before you if they didn't have a reason to.
Any other discussion? Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. President. So it's that time of year. I don't think anybody here is going to be out cleaning the streets of Norwood. Money's there to get the street sweeper. Public Works needs the street sweeper to make our streets beautiful. The people that we're listening to that are complaining about the emergency clause or the money spent on them are the same people that are going to be complaining that the streets aren't clean whenever we don't get this sweeper. So I urge you to maybe rethink it and let them buy this while it's available, so we don't pass it up and let somebody else get it. So I would urge that we pull our motion and have all 3 readings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Mr. Kelch?
Other than, I'm through the chair to the mayor, I'm sorry. Other than obviously keeping the streets clean, is there any underlying like maintenance? Does it help there with maintaining the quality of the roads as well, having a street sweeper and keeping those roads clean of debris?
Mr. Mayor?
The street sweeper will remove the gravel that's down. Maintaining the street, ultimately it will keep gravel and keep catch basins cleaner. It will pick up litter, so it keeps those things out of there. But it's not like it has the ability to patch a pothole or anything. But it is a piece. The street sweeper that they are purchasing is a different type of street sweeper, and it has the ability to dump from the front. There's a dump mode on the front where they can dump into a dump truck. So they don't have to go back to the shop. The way they clean it out right now is they'd have to go back to the shop and they dump it back at Public Works. This is the type of street sweeper that Cincinnati has that they were utilizing down on the Norwood lateral, the street sweeper that they are getting. So it does give us some more versatility and a little different use. So it will help us in keeping the streets cleaner and on some of those projects. So yes, I guess to answer your question is you're right, Mr. Kelch, it will.
Thank you.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah, just to provide a little bit more color, but also with an action. Full transparency, Mr. Dracy, this, if it's the same 2013 that we were talking about before, was actually, seemed like it was available in late February, like I think the first week in March. So it's not as if it has to be today, but it's also not, I think someone said 6 months, probably not going to be here in 6 months. So somewhere in that sweet spot. So I feel like there is urgency, but I really tossed up and down with myself about, like, do I want 3 readings or 1 reading? If it's 1 and we keep it, then let's commit to having 2, 3, and 5. Like, I don't want this to be 4 meetings from now. Like, it should be, if it's 2 weeks and you can go even further than the specs that are in front of you, let's just do 2 weeks to do that. Does that sound good? Because we probably want to pull on it. Oh, and it's not like Clint and his department haven't tried to repair. They actually were welding like old signs to try to make the box. I mean, they were doing everything they could to get the last drop out of this, and it's just not repairable.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Dracy.
Well, I appreciate everybody saying that they have specs, but I don't have specs. This is my only piece of paper right here. My printer didn't print that out, so I don't.
That wasn't an attack. I was just trying to say.
I don't have the specs in
2
front
weeks
of me.
if you could look at it.
That's the thing. I don't have. I don't have anything.
Got everything.
Any further discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'll just say that I've been around Clint when he's, I've talked to Clint about some of these different purchases that they need to make and, wish list items. And I was like, hey, Clint, like, what do you, there's a specific piece of equipment that I suggested. Is this something that Public Works could use? He's like, oh, that would be great. But essentially, it's like, there's just so many other priorities. We're going to focus on this and try to get the best bang for our buck. And I know that, Mr. Zimmerman has done that. So, I would have done all 3 readings today. I mean, it would have been fine. I'm fine, though, doing 2 readings next time, so, whatever needs to get done. But, I'm just excited they found this. I just did a quick Google search for this year and this model and everything, and it seems like this is a little bit lower than a lot of the prices that I was finding, so it seems like it's going to work for us.
Anyone else?
Well, yeah, actually, does that change anything for anybody? I mean, I know the motion right now is for
first reading.
For first reading. Sorry, thanks. Then I guess I'm looking at you. Would you be willing to? Did you raise?
I will revise my motion if Mr. Geraci wants to. If he does not, then I will keep my motion and we can vote on it.
That's fair.
That's fine. I'll pull my second.
Okay. Then I'd like to
pull my second.
So, Mr. Thompson, you rescind your motion, and Mr. Geraci rescind your motion?
I'd like to make a motion to have the 3 readings and basically allow the Safety Service Director to purchase this.
We have a motion by Mr. DiNardo.
Thanks, guys.
To suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Do I have a second? Mr. Bonsall? Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
I apologize. That was for all 3 readings?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase a rebuilt 2013 Elgin street sweeper and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase a rebuilt 2013 Elgin street sweeper and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase a rebuilt 2013 Elgin street sweeper and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. May I have a motion? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you. I'd move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to pass the ordinance. Mr. Breeden?
A second.
Second by Mr. Breeden. So we have a motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. Breeden to pass the ordinance. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bossel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item O, administrative reports. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Mr. President, council members, I appreciate a few minutes of your time. I won't take long, but I do have a couple of important things to talk about. The first one, of course, being the COVID-19 and the response and the reason why we're all sitting in this gymnasium instead of in our nice council chambers. Looks like the most recent reports are COVID-19 will be a threat through 2020, throughout all of it, until the development of a vaccine. So I don't know that that's news to anybody at all. In the city of Norwood, we have about 23 cases right now. When I say about, that's the numbers that we have right now. It's about. Ohio has 8,858 reported, with about 250 more probable cases out there. So it continues, and we all know that. It's the world we live in right now. Many have been hospitalized from COVID-19. Many have recovered from COVID-19, right? There are still many more cases pending. So we're not through this. I'd like to say that we are. The health department, the Norwood Health Department, has been doing a great job at working with POIs, which are persons of interest, patients of interest. They are getting reports from people who have COVID-19, and they are working with them, and they're trying their best to chase down the people they've been around and help them understand the quarantine requirements. But they are not the Gestapo. They can't bust down doors. And quite frankly, when it's reported that a person comes out of the hospital or a person has COVID-19 to the health department, we can go to their home. We can knock on the door. We can knock on their place of residence. We can call them. We can try. We can do everything we can. But quite frankly, we can't guarantee that they will respond back to us. We hope that they will report to us if they are residents of the city of Norwood. But in a lot of instances, when a person gets sick, they don't go back to their home, they go someplace else to convalesce. So if it's a young person, they're probably going to go to their parents' home. And that might not be in Norwood. And guess what? They're off the grid to us. We don't know where they are. And it's not that easy for us to chase them down. So the health department is doing their best to find the people that we know about, try to get them all the information that we can, and try to help, contain any type of contamination that could be caused from that stuff. But people do have rights, and we can't trounce on they're sick, and there's a lot of things a lot of loopholes and things that are problems. So we'll continue to do the best we can. The most recent incident with one of the convenience stores that shut down in the city of Norwood and posted on their door that they were closed. We got information as quickly as we could from them, but as I said before, there is no legal recourse that the city has that says that a business has to tell us when one of their associates becomes ill, whether it's United Dairy Farmer or whether it's Kroger or whether it's another place that is open. We don't have the ability, and they quite frankly don't have to report that an associate had it. That associate, if they live in Cincinnati, they're required to report it, but there's some differences in there, and I know that might not make people feel all that comfortable, but we live in a time of uncertainty, and I'm not very comfortable, and I don't know how many of you are, but it does increase our stress level, absolutely. But there's only certain things that your local government can do. So those are important parts to remember. There are reports, every day there's a briefing by the governor that you can watch. So the state is doing it, the county is doing coverage on it, right? And of course the federal government. So there are all sorts of resources out there to help you understand what needs to be done at this time. I know most recently the governor had stated that health procedures that do not require an overnight stay, hospital, veterinary practices, dental practices. You think about somebody who gets a sore tooth right now. If you got a tooth problem, you're in trouble, especially if it happened. And doctors' offices will open back up May 1st. And then May 4th, manufacturing, distribution, and construction. And then May 12th, consumer, retail, and services. So the only reason I bring that up is there is light at the end of this tunnel. And granted, the landscape has changed, and we're all going to probably be wearing masks for months and months from now. Until they find a vaccine, until they feel that it's done, we're not out of this. It's getting better, though. I feel confident that we're moving in the right direction. I feel confident that we've flattened the curve. We did all the things that they asked us to do, and I'm really proud of the citizens that took this stay-home order and tried and did their best to do shopping once and not go 5 times to the store, and the people that are really taking this serious, because it has been a serious effect on all of our lives. So just continue to do what we're doing, continue to listen and to follow the recommendations that we get, and we should be in good shape. Did you have a question on COVID-19? Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could speak to the high mortality rate here in Norwood. We've had, I think today, 5 deaths as a result of COVID-19. Which is when...
Not today, not 5 deaths today.
Not today.
We've had 5 deaths overall in the city of Norwood.
Yes, cumulative.
So we do have 2 care centers. Now, the number 1 place in the state, of course, is up in Mansfield at the prison. 73 or 75% of the prisoners have COVID-19 in there. Norwood does have 2 healthcare centers, so that bumps our numbers up. But if you look at the numbers and if you look at the charting that's out there for Hamilton County, there are a couple of communities that have jumped ahead of Norwood in cases of COVID-19.
But I wasn't speaking of cases, I meant the actual mortality rate. Compared to the number who have caught in Norwood, which is, I'm trying to pull it from memory today, was 35. With a 5 mortality rate, you're looking at about 15% mortality rate, when nationally mortality rate is around like 0.1%. So that's like, or 0.01%, I think. So, no wait, that's total. Anyway, it's a high mortality rate for our area, and I just wondered if you had any other knowledge. I've emailed the health department and not gotten a response on the question, so I was just wondering if maybe you had heard anything.
I do not. We are doing, the health department's doing updates every day, and I'm getting pretty much the same numbers that I think all of you are getting. We have, I think, 23 cases, I say roughly 23 cases, 3 that are suspected right now. We've got 3 confirmed that are hospitalizations. This one lists 4 fatalities, but it's got 5 fatalities. There was another one added to it today. And then total number recovered right now is 10 in the city of Norwood. Yeah. So looking at those numbers, they are not, I have not seen a breakdown of age groups or anything that tells me exactly where it is. I do know that our healthcare facility down there, the two buildings down there have had some different problems, but there's a strike team, there's a team working with our health department to try to take care of some stuff down there. I know that the fire chief was involved in a lot of that at the very beginning to make sure that they were following the protocols to protect their patients, because there have been some care facilities like that have not, but they have taken it very serious, and I think their director of health down there has done a pretty good job at it. I'm not sure exactly of those numbers. There are a lot of HIPAA laws. There's a lot of information that you can't share, medical information that you can't share. We're trying to share as much as we can without stepping on somebody's civil rights. And quite frankly, I think that the state and the county have done a pretty good job at trying to get us all up to speed on what is there. I don't know that answers the question.
No, I mean, not really, but it's all right. I mean, I don't, it might be an unknown reason why we're at where we are. I was just curious if you had any insight. It's all right.
I'll tell you, I feel like I should be a COVID-19 expert, because I get emails every day, from multiple different jurisdictions and organizations. One is the Hamilton County Emergency Management is putting out site reports. There's the Hamilton County group. There's the actual Regional Chamber of Commerce is putting things out. There's so much information that's coming out. Every time it seems like DeWine sneezes, there's another email blast that goes out that tells you what he said. So there's so much information, and that's being passed on to to others. I mean, the fire chief, the police chief, they get inundated with emails on this stuff also. For interdepartmental communications, every Monday, we are having a conference call. We have a Zoom meeting. So with that, we've got the health commissioner, the sanitarian, and the nurse from the health department sitting in on that. Fire chief, police chief, the safety service director, the superintendent of public works. I'm sitting in on that. Keith Moore, the law director, has been sitting in on that Monday morning meeting. And really, the biggest thing is to bring all of us together within the administration to talk about how we can support each other and making sure that each department has what they need to continue on. The fire chief talks about the burn rate on PPE, and we're talking a lot about staff and making sure our staff is supported and that they've got everything they need. I really do commend the police and fire department. They've done a great job of really reducing the contamination and keeping the spacing in place and doing all the things that they need to do to keep our citizens safe in other areas. You know, this is the unseen enemy, but the other enemies are always out there. So our police and fire department have been doing a great job. The other part we talk about in general is sort of staffing morale. And everybody's going through this together. It is a stressful time. And, you know, you would think that spending much more time with your family would not be so much more stressful, and being away from your job would be much less stressful, but we're finding out that that sense of purpose and that direction to get up every day and go to work is almost as stressful as as having it. So those are important aspects of it. And I really do think that our community members, I know where I am, you can sit on that front porch and watch people exercising, and they are recognizing the social distancing. They're staying away from each other, but they're staying away, but they're giving a good handshake, or not handshake, a hand wave, and saying hello, and very friendly. And I think that we're doing well as a community. And, you know, we just need to stay positive. We're getting through this. Follow the new guidelines. So that's it on the COVID-19 stuff, I would say. Let's see, I got two more notes here. One is on the water department stuff, which we came together. We had the special meeting and talked about waiving fees, and we are still working in the water department to get beyond where we were. It is a continuous improvement effort, and we will continue to do that. We did add a person to the water department. We added a person who's worked in there before to help them get ahead of some of the call-ins and some of the different things, verifying, making sure that we're clearing all those call-ins and making sure that, and verifying that the numbers are as accurate as possible. So we feel like that will be helpful. The late fees have been waived. It is still very important that our residents are calling in their water meter readings. And I know that's not always easy to do, and I know it's not something that we're very used to doing if the water meter reader was walking around doing it, but those blue cards are going out, and we still please make the effort to fill out that blue card and call them in or send them in. So it is very important that you get that information in. The last one we'll talk about is just moving forward with projects, collecting bids, the roofing of the city hall, roofing of the fire department. You saw that. The staff has not stopped working. John continues to make headways on a lot of different projects, and I'd say that John Murphy continues to make headway, and he's moving forward. One of the things he was working on now was just putting up some guards in City Hall, so that when people do start coming back to City Hall, that we have protections for our employees in there. And then we implemented the face mask stuff, so everybody's got masks that were issued to them today, and we got to continue with that, and decontamination and all those things. So John continues to work on those projects. He's been working on HVAC systems, getting them preventive maintenance right now. He's finding some different problems, and he's finding where there hasn't been preventive maintenance on some of this equipment in years and years. A big one that he basically, pushed on me was that he made me aware of, is that even our emergency generators haven't been preventive maintenance for a while. So making sure that, when the power goes out, that our generators fire up and that we're in good shape there. So, and I know this is all is related to not having the money. And, a lot of that is, well, we can put it off this year because it's one area we But these are areas that are very important. Even downstairs for our emergency dispatch, we have basically two HVAC systems that are supposed to keep all our dispatch equipment, all the computer equipment, and I know we all know how hot this computer stuff gets. We've been running on one system down there and really pushing it hard, so we're trying to get that other system fixed. It's been down apparently for the last year or two, so we're going to work on getting those things done. So painting, we're looking at painting projects, we're looking at roof projects for City Hall. The community center still, we've got to look at that roof. That's our next big hurdle because it's got problems too. I think it's 18 years old or 15 years old, and again, that's a membrane roof, as Mr. Braden or Councilman Braden was talking about. That's a membrane roof, so we've got a lot of different challenges, and I know that there is a lot of push saying, oh, we're spending money, we're spending a lot of money. What we are spending money on is deferred maintenance items. It's things that have not been taken care of over the years because we didn't have the money to take care of those. So now we do have to spend some money to get those pieces of equipment, those buildings, those things back in shape, and we'll do it. And we are watching the budget, and we are absolutely looking at the financial impact of what this will have on the city. That is absolutely in the back of my mind every time we make a move. We feel confident that, this year we're okay, and next year we've got a little bit of a cushion, not a ton, but the Finance Committee's already talked about it. I know Councilman DiNardo's been talking about it. I know that the Auditor, Jim Stith, has been talking about it and trying to put together some numbers. I'm sure the Treasurer will come up with some different projections, but it is something that we are thinking about and that we will continue to work on as we move forward. But there are certain areas we have to spend some money to get things done, and there are certain things that we need to do to be productive in the future and to accomplish a lot of the goals and a lot of the things that you guys have told me. This is what we want to get done. This is what I want to get done. And so there's a lot of those things that I'm still moving forward on. I'm going to try to make them happen, not just for you guys, but for the city. It needs to be done. So that's all I have. I'm sorry if I rambled on too long.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Moving on, item P, other requests to address council. I do not have any at this time. Item Q, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening? Mr. Geraci.
I did speak with Mayor Schneider regarding the small grassy area behind, I think, again, 4216 Montgomery. I believe that's the address. I should know that by now as much as I've been doing on this property. And I was advised that SORTA does not want to sell that property, which is disheartening to me as to why they are refusing to sell it and keeping a piece of property that they're not utilizing, something us, the city, and the residents could utilize ourselves, and that they're, I guess, wanting to look at maybe possibly leasing it to us. I know they've got this levy coming up on the next ballot, and I think I don't understand if they're hurting for money so bad why they wouldn't work with us to get us the property. But I do appreciate the work that's been going on to try and speak with SORTA and get some sort of resolution to it. I'm disappointed in SORTA and their inability to work with the cities, not just us, but other cities, but then come out and ask every resident in the county to give up money. To me, that's outrageous and ridiculous. But they've got property they're sitting on. Just get rid of the property and get some money out of it, I guess. It's ridiculous that they won't help us expand our community development the way we really should be expanding it.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Anyone else? Any other unfinished business this evening? Then we'll move on to item R, new business. Any new business this evening? Mr. DiNardo?
Yep. A couple items. The first is the 2021 tax budget for those of you who've been on council before, this is not new, I suppose, but this is the submission of the 2021 tax budget is kind of the first step in preparing our budget for the next year. When it's submitted to the county, it allows them to evaluate and approve the distribution of tax collected on our behalf. It'll currently match the plan assumptions as of right now, but in any case, Jim Stith, our auditor, has to submit that 2021 tax budget on July 17th. So let's work backwards. President Miracle, I would request if you put on the agenda for June 23rd, so I think that it would be the second meeting in June, for a public hearing on the 2021 tax budget during that general council meeting. That's probably a good amount of time to allow folks to talk about it. We ourselves can have a good discussion. There will be a finance committee in between there, but I'll talk about that in a second. And then back that up to June 9th, 2 weeks prior, that's when all of us will be presented with that tax budget. So that'll be kind of our first chance to see that. And remember, again, this is kind of round one of the development of our 2021 financial budget. So just look forward to that. Residents, June 23rd is when we'd like to hear from you if there's something to talk about. Yeah.
For the people listening, would you mind doing a quick definition of what that tax budget actually is?
So what it actually is for the county to review and say, I see the ins and outs for 2021, and it's in a way that we'll feel comfortable distributing the taxes that we, the county, have assessed on you, Norwood's behalf. So they're kind of holding the purse strings for us, and they're going to release that money if they deem us not acting a fool, I suppose. And so we're going to present something like the plan and the reason it's not going to look that different than the plan right now is because the next 3 months, is when our treasurer, Tim Maloney, our auditor, Jim Stith, and then us finance committee will be working with the administration to develop our revenue projections. Those revenue projections are obviously going to be critically important because we think 2021 is going to be a little different than what 2020 looks like. 2020 will probably not have a huge, well, I'll let Tim talk about that actually. I just wanted to answer your question.
No, that's
the reason for it.
Thank you, Mr. Donardo.
So, June 23rd, please.
Got it. Any other new business? Mr. Dracy?
I'd like to place into the Housing Committee an ordinance pertaining to the regulation of chronic nuisance premises, and I will call a meeting sometime next week. I haven't come up with a date yet, unless we can come up with a date tonight for the committee members.
So you want to have a committee meeting next week, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll try and get something out later tonight, an email out to the committee members, and have something by at least Friday.
Okay.
But I would like to place this into discussion at that committee.
And make sure you copy Mrs. Velez
Yes.
on that. We'll put it on the calendar. Anything else, Mr. Dracy? Anyone else? Mr. DiNardo?
Actually, I have another comment on the Finance Committee. We would like to hold on May 19th. I was trying to segue that. I kind of forgot about it. On May 19th, that's when we could all get together. And actually, I was hoping for the agenda to be about an assessment or kind of a preview of our revenue projections. That'll be kind of the first time we're going to be discussing it. I've invited Tim Maloney. I think that he can make it on the 19th, but I need him to confirm that, so hopefully that works out. Were you raising your hand for me?
Well, about this subject, I'd love to see, I think I told you the 19th.
You did,
I mean,
yeah.
I'd love to see if we could move it to the 6th if possible. I think that was one of your other alternate dates.
Yeah.
If not, it's fine.
Yeah, I did get your text. I was just waiting to hear back from Tim, and I hadn't yet, so I presumed that since I'd given him May 19th, I wanted to stick to that until he responded with either one of the three options.
Yeah, I mean, I had talked to him about it. He was, he definitely wants later in the week than earlier, so the Wednesday was probably going to, but yeah, definitely see if you can confirm it with him. But
You know what? Forget it. I'll get back to you guys after I talk to Tim, or he responds to me, and we'll figure it out. On the agenda items, just so people will tune in to whether it's early May or mid-May. Revenue projections, hopefully, I want Tim to come there so he can help kind of steer that conversation. We'll start the formulation process on the financial planning review that will happen in the third quarter. That's the rhythm that we talked about in February of having, the mayor, our auditor, input from the revenue projections from the treasurer, and us, the finance committee, saying, I know that we set the plan, does that plan still make sense 6 months later? So we were going to start to formulate that process, and I would like to talk through that with the team. And then lastly, some council members, they want to say, they wanted to come and at least discuss or ideate, if that's a word, around the funding, potential administration, and the evaluation process that would be associated for a small business startup loan due to COVID-19 financial pressures. There's nothing more behind that. I think it will be a discussion that we'll have in the finance committee, so I guess drumming up excitement for that meeting. So not May 19th for sure, but I'll let you and Laura and Maria know when that's going to be.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Anyone else? Mr. Kelch?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to schedule a Parks Committee meeting, Parks, Recreation, and Public Spaces Committee meeting for May 19th, or May 20th, I'm sorry, if that works for whoever's on there. DiNardo, does that work for you?
Well,
It's the day after our finance.
Potentially, so could I?
Get back.
Yeah. I want to find out if that'll happen or not.
Mr. Thompson?
It's fine with me.
Mr. Tracy?
That'll work as long as it's 7:30-ish.
Yeah, we will hold it at 7:30, and there's some issues I'd like to discuss there. There's the hill falling in Millcrest Park, Upper Millcrest to Lower Millcrest. It's really kind of made the baseball field unusable, unplayable, and we would like to discuss that issue as well as some of the projects we have that we have bids on that we would like to see happen. And I will also be presenting and discussing a possible park overhaul renovation for a single park here in Norwood, and I'd like to discuss that with committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. I saw someone has their hand over here. Mr. Bonds?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I had a resident reach out to me about, and it's kind of apt as today's the last day for voting, but political yard signs near the Board of Election, they had just asked me about are they supposed to be there? Can they be there? I had informed them if they're on private property, of course, that's really up to the private property landlord or the owner of the property. However, I think some of them probably are on like city right-of-ways, and I was just wanting to note that I was hoping that we could work together on a plan for the general election, just being it's a presidential year, and to try to limit the number of signs that are out there. So I'd like to refer this potentially to the housing committee to look at to see like what kind of we could do for the future. And it's not just going and picking them up. I mean, of course, we could have the city all day long go and pick them up, but the thing is these campaigns are going to put them right back in once you pick them up. So potentially it could be the Board of Elections sending out a memo to campaigns or what have you, but I'd like to look into that and see potentially what we can do about it.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Gabbard?
Yeah, I'd like to place into Streets Committee the topic of street calming, traffic calming. That doesn't we can wait till we kind of get past some of this to have a committee meeting, but traffic calming.
Would you, in what area? Just
in general?
In general?
Yeah, the whole city.
In Norwood?
Yeah, just street calming. Ideas, just to get some ideas and some thoughts going on that.
Yes, sir.
Anyone further, if I could do to the mayor, the city Facebook page, who monitors that or moderates that or administers it or whatever?
Me.
All right.
Me, as well as there's 2 administrative assistants in the office that are administrators.
the only reason I'm asking is because I've had a couple different people reach out and say that comments were deleted or whatever the comments were or anything like that. I would be very just concerned about if it's a city page, limiting that free speech. If nothing else, I would suggest that I think that with the pages, that you can make it to where nobody can leave a comment unless you're actually seeking, like comments back from the residents. So if you're, that way, as you use it for an information to get information out, that way no one's getting censored or says that they're getting censored or anything like that. Just a suggestion, I'd like to throw that out to you.
I could comment on that as well.
Mr. Thompson.
I've also received complaints about comments being deleted, which I think if they aren't in violation of our resolution, is a violation of First Amendment, because we are a public community, and people, whether we like what they say or not, are allowed to say them. I think there's a fairly simple solve. If you would like to keep comments on for this, and I'll float it out here. I don't know if it will require an amendment to the resolution to implement or not, but the idea is basically if whomever is administrating the Facebook page, if they determine that they feel that a comment should be deleted, that a copy of that comment should be sent to the person who posted it with the line item from the rules for the Facebook page that they violated, so they understand why the comment was removed and exactly what rule they violated in posting the comment to begin with. This will give us two things. One, it will serve to inform people who might be commenting in an inappropriate manner what they're doing wrong. And two, it creates a paper trail because these are also public records issues. In deleting comments and they go away, if somebody did a public records request on site and those comments are gone, that could become an issue. So just moving forward, I would suggest that you leave a paper trail or a digital paper trail specifically identifying what violation occurred and just keep track of it that way. I think that would go a long way in solving the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. You had your hand. Mr.
But
Nardo?
that's a process thing. If we need to put it in the resolution to force the process to happen or whatever, that's fine. Or if you just want to say, hey, that sounds like a great idea, that's also fine.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. DiNardo?
Yeah. This isn't so much the Facebook, but do you have an update on the website generation? Like the updates to the website, the way it's going to be used, or anything like that?
Next time.
No, I don't have an update on it. I guess I could give you an update saying that the students that were working on the website went pretty much goodbye pretty quickly. I did have an email that went back and forth, and they are finishing up, and they will send us some information, but it did not work out the way that we wanted it to with the COVID-19. They couldn't meet. There were specific teams, and they were sort of driven to do that. So we think we'll get some product from them, something from them in the next week or so, with some directions that they worked on, but we were not able to get everything that we wanted out of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously that makes sense as soon as you opened your mouth and I heard it. The reason I brought it up and was hoping to kind of get an ear is one of the things actually my wife brought it up, and then a few other people have been talking to me, is clarity on like how to direct people to particular departments. Like if I had a question on X, I would go here. If I had a question on Y, I would go there. If I had a comment on, and I wanted to talk to a certain person. For someone who's not kind of really pulsed in on the city, you might not know the names or even where to go. It's hard because we are all around the city a lot, and so we see things as easy to navigate. That's why I was particularly excited about the website getting updated, mostly because maybe FAQ or an overview of how to help direct people might take the place of whatever the Facebook communication channel was happening. I thought that the Facebook communication channel was unidirectional. I actually didn't know that we were doing comments until I saw comments being allowed. And if that's the intent, that's cool. I just thought the website or future versions of the website might help some of those communication channels where the Facebook might not be the intended purpose.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Braden, did you have your hand up, sir?
I did, thank you, Mr. President. I just want to disagree with a few comments about the Facebook page. When the administration brung this to us, there was a page of rules, and I read them clearly. And there are other Facebook pages that you can go and you can make negative comments on all day long. But I personally agree and I support the fact that our Facebook page wants to be informational and get information out. However, I think it's perfectly in the realm of being appropriate that we delete nasty comments. And I want to just say that I support the fact that if you have a nasty comment, that it needs to be deleted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Thompson.
Would you care to comment, Mr. Moore?
We have a policy, and for now, we should follow the policy that we have. If there are changes to be made, we can make a change to the policy. We don't have the same right, we don't have the same freedom. Like if I have my own personal page, or if I run a page, or not me, but if somebody else, people are running pages and they take off comments they like and put comments on they like, and we are limited in what we can and cannot do in that context, and there are certain rules you have to follow. We're not completely free to just delete what we like and not delete what we don't like. But we have a policy, and the policy is, tries to lay out that this is not designed as a public forum. The other side of that, though, is that any time you do delete somebody's comment, or any time you tell somebody they can't do something, they're going to be mad about it. So the more you can do to, kind of explain what's going on or make it as open a process as you can, the less likely you are to aggravate people. And the more you aggravate people, the more likely they are to cause further problems or lead to litigation or who knows what kind of issue. So, but we are much more limited in what the city is allowed to do or what kind of policies we can have that a private enterprise would be.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Anyone else?
I'll respond if you don't mind.
Oh, Mr. Braden.
I mean, my last response, but two things. I either don't care about any of that or get rid of the page. So that's my last response.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Bonson.
Yeah, I'd like to see if the mayor might have a response to everything going on.
Mayor Stein.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the ability to talk for just a minute here. The page is informational. I will tell you this. I have never deleted, nor have I been asked by either any of the other people if they should be deleting comments on that page. So I think that what you're hearing is a rumor or somebody who has another page who doesn't really like that the city of Norwood has a Facebook page, because our Facebook page is a place to get information about the city of Norwood, the things that are going on, the activities. It is an informational page. As Mr. Braden stated, I'm not going on that page and answering questions to people. I produce my email address, I produce my telephone number. You can call the City of Norwood's informational line, 458-4500. They will tell you what needs to be done. There is a City of Norwood website, but it is not a forum, and I'm not going to get on there and argue with haters that get on a Facebook page, on the City of Norwood's Facebook page. There's no reason for the City of Norwood, for the mayor, or anybody that works for the City of Norwood to get on a Facebook page and try to defend themselves against a bunch of people that want to just spew hate. So my thoughts on this are clearly that it is an informational page, and I will take all your suggestions under consideration. And I clearly feel like when we put together this media thing, when we put the social media policy together, we said this is an informational page. This is a place to get information about what's going on in the city. Controlled by the city, yes. It'll be information about the city. It is not a discussion. It's not a forum. That is not what it is. And if I need to, every time somebody posts something, send them, message them and say, that's not what this is, we've removed it, and make a list of all those people and say, sorry, we removed that guy, that person, we'll just remove it every time from then on. I mean, we can do that. I'd actually look to see if we could turn off the commenting on it when it was set up, and I don't think you cannot turn off that function of Facebook. But we can do other things to handle that, but it is an informational page. If you want information about what's going on in the city of Norwood, you go to the City of Norwood, Ohio Facebook page, and you can read down through and see what's going on, and maybe we'll have things on the calendar, events and different things. But it is not a place where you can say, hey, I don't think they should be doing this in the City of Norwood. It's just not that way. It is one way to get information to people. We don't, quite frankly, when I took over as mayor, we had nothing. We had nothing for the City of Norwood to communicate. We have started to collect up emails. We put out a form on there to say, fill out this form, and we're going to try to get together email blasts so we can send them out. I'm going to come to City Council and say, these are the ways we want to try to communicate, and quite frankly, we're going to need some money. It might be constant contact, but there are ways that we need, and this COVID-19 emergency is in our face, that we as a community need to be able to communicate clearly from the city to the community members without anybody in the middle. We need to be able to communicate, and we don't have a good tool for doing that. So right now, the Facebook page is information. That's really what it is. It's not a forum. And we do have a website that's up right now, and if you have questions about what is on that website, go and look at the Norwood, Ohio website. And we do have the information telephone number that you can call during business hours, and you can talk to one of the administrative assistants, and they'll say, oh, you need to talk to somebody in the tax department, or, oh, this is handled by the auditor's department. And they will hit 4 numbers and transfer you right to that department. So there's a lot of different ways to communicate. We're doing our best at City Hall to get those things, all those good things in place. But we're not going to go back and forth with the haters. And there are people that are disappointed that maybe they didn't get elected. Your opponents. They might be your opponents that are out there that are disappointed, and they might be a hater. They might be disappointed that everything you do, doesn't matter if you're doing good or bad for the City of Norwood, everything you do is wrong. And they'll find a way to make 5 other people feel that you're doing it wrong. Well, you can't really stop, that can't stop you from doing positive things in the role and the place that you're at. And that's really what we're trying to do as a council. That's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to do as the mayor. I know that Keith Moore is trying to do that as a law director. So we try to do positive things, and there will be people that will post bad things, and we'll do the best we can. That's really all that we can do. And so if you're looking at that Facebook page as something more than an informational page about what's going on in the City of Norwood, you're looking at the wrong place. Go to one of those other sites, and there's a couple of them out there. Feel free to go there. So,
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I could respond.
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. I totally understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate your intent. But despite the intent that the Facebook page is supposed to be information only, 20 years of Facebook indicates that it's a social platform where back and forth commenting occurs. So I've been in the business, I've been in advertising and marketing business my entire career. I've been involved with social media since it's been a thing. When you run a social media account, you're responsible for monitoring and addressing the commenting that goes on within that account, unless you turn off all commenting. I would never expect you to go on and respond to haters, interact with haters, and dive down that rabbit hole. All I'm saying is we can't delete those comments. Multiple comments have been deleted today. Comments have been deleted with no explanation, purely because I believe that they just didn't appreciate them. And I don't think we can do that. I'm just trying to solve us from having a bigger problem in the future. I think if whoever is deleting the comments if they can look at the resolution and say, I'm deleting the comment because it says right here that you can't say something like that, perfect. Delete the comment, send them a note. If you can't look at the resolution and come up with a good reason why you should delete that comment, then it has to stay.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Bonzo?
So, and I think part of this too could just be a training. I mean, you know, there's another agency in Hamilton County that just got in trouble for this, and they've retrained their people. And so if there has been deleted comments, then that could just be a training thing. I have non-social media stuff to talk about. That's okay too, though. Okay, thank you. So the other thing that one of the other things that we normally do on council is about this time is that we approve dates for a citywide street sale. And you know, with COVID-19, I mean, you know, I slipped from my mind to even bring it up to talk about it, but we normally do one in May and then do one in the fall. And it's, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me that we should not do, like, you know, have a citywide street sale in May. I mean, it seems to me that it wouldn't make sense.
Sorry, what word are you saying? Street?
Oh yeah, so this is basically the city is trying to encourage people to have yard sales at certain times of the year and not just have random yard sales every weekend. So there's this thing called citywide street sale where we approve basically that the yard sale fee is waived to create one, and it just kind of creates this big blast of yard sales all at the same time, so people can go house to house, and the city puts out a list. So anyways, long story short is we normally do one in May and do one sometime around Labor Day. I just wanted to get feedback from council or from the mayor about where, you know, just their thoughts on it. I mean, to me, I think we should just not take any action right now because there's so much uncertainty, but, you know, open to suggestions on what council should do with that.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo.
Okay. And then
I'll respond. I think with the restrictions being reduced from the governor, I think it was yesterday, the type of restrictions that he's doing kind of each week, this is an outdoor event. People are, you know, pretty much wearing masks. I would, if anything, and I reached out to the mayor a month ago about this, just kind of curious. If anything, I would think that maybe we give everybody a break. Right now, on the citywide street sale, you have to have a permit, but we're not charging for it. And I would just say, hey, you know, because we're in a crazy world right now, you don't even need a permit. We're going to okay, if you want to have it, you can have it. If not, but, you know, we would still encourage you as the person holding the yard sale to kind of make sure that things are monitored, and people in general that, you know, just continue your social distancing. And but hopefully, you know, man, people are cooped up and starting to get cabin fever. And, you know, I made a comment the other day that, you know, everybody knows I play Santa, that I was thinking, well, come Christmas time, I think Santa's probably going to be delivering a lot of babies. He might be delivering a whole lot of divorces too, you know. So just allow people to get out of the house if it's a nice day, and go walk around your neighborhood and buy a couple items from somebody. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Geraci?
I would agree with Mr. Gabbard that I believe this is typically towards the end of the month anyway, of May.
It's usually the first weekend.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if we push it back to the end of May, I think we should be okay as far as conducting something like this. And I think something like this, again, it's an outdoor event, and I think people are wise enough to know whether or not they should be holding this street sale or not. And, you know, people are already out walking. Why not give them something to buy?
Thank you, Mr. Geraci. Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I couldn't disagree more with the idea that we should be encouraging people to go into each other's yards and interact and purchase things at this point in time. Restrictions, there are plans to lift restrictions, but those lifted restrictions come with very detailed instructions on how you are to lift those restrictions, from monitoring your employees' temperature to overall health, to constantly wearing masks, to the amount of cleaning you have to do, and to the times and frequency of cleaning you have to do. Just because May 1st has been touted as some magical date that this is over, it's not over. And I'm not comfortable risking the health of our community over the chance to go browse somebody's goods in the yard sale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Mr. Kelch?
Regarding the topic, I think I kind of want to move it to the Housing Health Public Safety Committee, because we're going to be meeting on that, right? Soon?
What?
Shortly?
On what?
Well, the Housing Health Public Safety Committee, we're going to be having a meeting.
Next week.
I'd like to place that item on that agenda to discuss that further.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I still would support just having, if we're going to do it, potentially one day in the fall, maybe August, late August, early September. I think that we're almost rushing it to try to do it now, to do the citywide street sale, just because, but I'm also okay with it going to committee. Just want to make sure the committee knows that if you're going to try to do one for the spring, or early summer, that we just need to get this ordinance going through council, sooner rather than later. But I mean, I definitely still support, though, what Mr. Thompson said, and potentially planning one in the fall. And let's go ahead and get the ordinance going now and get working on it now, so people know when the date's going to be. But that would just be my personal opinion, just based on what I see.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Anyone else? Any other new business? Mr. Bonsall.
Sorry, thank you. So just one last thing. I heard from Mary C. Miller from Norwood Together, and she just wanted to share a few things that were kind of going on. The first off is that they're working with the Norwood City Health Department and the Norwood Makers Collective and then there's several community seamstresses, but they're basically providing cloth face masks, and they kind of look like this for those in need. And so if you'd like to get a cloth face mask, and I don't think they're charging for them, they say you can actually contact the health department and they'll have a list kind of going, but it's 513-458-4600. You won't pick it up at the health department, but there's a no contact way that you can pick it up on somebody's porch, essentially. So if you're interested in that, you can just call the health department, 513-458-4600, I've been told. And then Norwood Together is also partnering with, I guess, the Creamy Whip. So they're going to buy ice cream cones for people on Saturday, May 2nd. So the first 100 customers that stop in, if they mention Norwood Together, then they can get a free ice cream cone. So that's Saturday, May 2nd. And then the last thing, they're also working with Baby Bear to donate diapers to them. Baby Bear is kind of in need right now. There's just been, I think, an increased demand. So I think they're going to be able to, they've raised together almost close to 2,000 diapers, but just anybody else that has any, extra diapers at home, or if you want to donate diapers to that cause, it's a wonderful Norwood charity that's focused on Norwood babies. I think you can reach out to Norwood Together, or you can reach out to Baby Bear directly. They have a Facebook page. Stephanie Downs is also really involved in that, so feel free to reach out to them. And then lastly, so the Waterworks basketball courts that's been worked on, I don't know if the work's been completed yet, but essentially they're working on a launch date for when there would be a community date for when when it's going to be done. So there'll be more to come there, and I'm sure they're working with, and I'm sorry, didn't mean to step on anything that Mr. Kelch was doing, but I'm sure they're working with Parks Committee and everything else, but she had just mentioned that the launch date's going to be coming. So that is all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Kelch.
Yeah, to add on what Mr. Bonsall was saying about the Waterworks basketball courts, they're looking tentatively in June, hoping with the ideology that this is kind of all pass us by a little bit. But I do think that's a floating date. And also they asked if I would organize a kind of a 3-versus-3 basketball tournament for that too. So what my idea is, they're trying to make that a pretty big deal, trying to maybe get the firefighters to come down and grill out, stuff like that. Again, hoping that this has kind of passed us by then. And another note, speaking of Miss Miller, who's doing really awesome work, she's looking into grants, and we're working together on that to try to find some grant funding for the rec department's roof. And I know the mayor mentioned the roof there earlier, and we're trying to work to find some grant money for that to kind of help with that as well. So just to kind of update what Mr. Bonsall was saying.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Anyone else? That concludes new business. Move on to item S, communications. We have 5 communications this evening.
Was one added?
No.
I mean, the first one that I see is from Mayor Schneider about the court fines.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just misheard you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Let's see. Letter dated April 1st, 2020, to Mr. Ken Miracle, President, regarding mayor's court fines. Dear President and members of council, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of March 2020. Should you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file the letter. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, the thing here has, the different types of fines and stuff. I just want to make it just a general note. I know I've heard a lot of complaints from people about just speeding in neighborhoods and such, and, I know that we're going to be working on street calming and stuff, but just ask people, please just be careful out there. Police officers don't want to pull you over. They don't want to deal with you. Just the people in the neighborhoods, their kids are out, they're out on bikes and such. So just ask that people please just kind of be cognizant that and be respectful of our neighbors and to try to keep the speed under control. It seems like 71 north and south, like when you get up near Kindlewood and past it, that the median speed's like 80 right now. So we don't need that here. I know they're not it's just a lot of speed right now. So just ask that we just be respectful of our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Dracy.
This really isn't pertaining to the topic, but if you could speak up a little bit for me, please.
I will.
Yep. I'm like really far away from you. I don't know how Mr. Kelch over there can hear you, but
I'll work on it.
Nods.
Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Bonsall, a second by Mr. Thompson to receive and file the letter from Mayor Schneider regarding the mayor's court fines for March 2020. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Moving on to the second letter, Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated April 3rd of 2020 to Norwood City Council. Dear council members, this letter is to let you know that the March monthly financial reports were emailed to each council member on April 3rd. If you have not received said email, please let me know so that I can verify your email address and also get you a copy of the reports. Sincerely, Kelly Brown, Account Clerk, Auditor's Office.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. DiNardo.
Motion to file?
Motion by Mr. DiNardo to receive and file the letter. May I have a second? Mr. Kelch? Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye to receive and file the letter. Moving on to the third letter. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated April 21st of 2020 to Norwood City Council regarding merit increase for Assistant Law Director. Dear council members, council recently passed an ordinance raising the pay ranges of the appointed, non-classified positions with the city. The minimum increase in those ranges was 10%, in part to recognize that the appointed employees had not received a raise in 10 years. When the Assistant Law Director joined the city in 2016, council approved a starting salary higher than the minimum in recognition of his many years of experience in criminal prosecution, civil litigation, and prior term as Norwood Law Director. Consequently, his pay rate did not go up when council recently raised the pay ranges. Mr. Gary is in his 5th exemplary year of Assistant Law Director. He regularly goes above and beyond what might be expected. I'm requesting that council approve a 5% pay increase retroactive to January 1st of 2020. As you can see from the attached Ohio State Bar Association report on the economics of law practice in Ohio, Mr. Gary will still be below the median salary for all government employees, below the average for employees with his years of experience, and below the median for government employees in the Cincinnati area. The requested increase has been factored into the revised fiscal recovery plan and the amended appropriations that council passed at the last regular meeting. My thanks to Mayor Schneider, Auditor Stiff, and Finance Chair DiNardo for incorporating this change. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Keith Moore, Law Director.
Mr. DiNardo.
I'd like to have a motion to file, but then we can discuss afterwards.
Receive and file. Motion by Mr. DiNardo. May I have a second? A second by Mr. Thompson to receive and file. Any discussion? Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah. So he's right in the letter. It kind of laid it out, everything that we would all, I think, as a body, want to see, which is A, it was factored in the plan, and B, it's sorely needed for someone, I think, that, does a heck of a lot, both behind the scenes and explicitly for our residents. I can think of 4 different emails right now from residents in Ward 2 that it's almost like the forward button was hit right to Tim Gary, and he jumped in and handled it. So, if you want him to keep helping, we're going to need to make sure that he likes being here. In terms of what do we do about that, I think that what it would just be us approving or letting the mayor know that we would approve to make the pay increase or pay bump. Keith, is that, or Mr. Moore, is that right? Then we just have to kind of give him our recommendation. I think that's what's being asked.
I was just thinking, actually, it's just council needs to approve it. It occurred to me while I was sitting here that when, and it may have happened with this, when we did with the superintendent of public works, the last meeting, is that if council could just make a motion to send a letter to the auditor that they approve the increase, then the auditor will know, because it's just the auditor needs to know that council has approved it.
Okay. Well then, in addition to filing, can we all just kind of say that we approve, or have an opportunity for each of us to say yay or nay on that, and it gives kind of a...
I think what you could do is just say, receive and file the letter and and send a letter to the auditor to approve.
So the motion is to receive and file and forward a copy of the letter to the auditor. Is that correct?
Forward a copy with our approval.
With your approval to the auditor. Is that correct? Okay.
Thanks.
And you second that, Mr. Thompson? Okay.
Cool, man.
Any further discussion? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate that. So clarify, that wasn't in the resolution we passed with the pay increases? Because I thought that we had two, one that was created by the mayor, one that was created by others. So that wasn't in there? I thought we discussed this already and already approved it.
No, it wasn't, because that's not actually part of that list.
So,
was the head shaking because...
Who else wants a raise?
Here, can I?
Mr. Mayor.
So the salary range is put in there. The assistant law director is within that salary range at this time. So we increased the salary range. We didn't increase it that much for him, but we did increase it, but he's within that salary range. So he didn't see any effect from that salary change from the ordinance that we did. What Mr. Gary or Mr. Moore is asking for is, let's recognize this employee for the great job that he's been doing and give him that 5% increase that they haven't had all this time. So he's getting a merit increase for the great job he's been doing for the city of Norwood. He's still within the salary range, right? Even with this increase, he's still within the salary range. It's just recognizing an employee for the great job that he's done and his qualifications, quite frankly.
And just to note, he did this actually was brought up, I guess it's like 2 months ago when we were going through this. I think that's when you drafted the letter, and we did talk about how that wasn't going to feel that bump for that exact reason. So this shouldn't be too new, I suppose.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion by Mr. DiNardo, a second by Mr. Thompson, to receive and file the letter from Keith Moore, Law Director, regarding the merit increase for the Assistant Law Director, and to forward approval to the Auditor. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Sure.
All members present, voting aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Item 4, letter from Safety Service Director. Mrs. Williams.
Let's see, letter dated April 22nd of 2020 to Maria Williams, Clerk of Council, regarding permission to advertise for bids. Dear Maria, I'm requesting permission from council to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the re-roof, membering/coating only, at the Norwood Fire Department building at the next City Council meeting, April 28th, 2020. Once I have permission, I will have the Law Department prepare an ordinance to advertise for bids. Please find the attached letter outlining the specs that will be submitted for bids.
Mr. Geraci.
Motion to receive and file.
Mr. Bonds.
I'd like a second.
Second?
Second, please.
Okay. We have a motion by Mr. Geraci, a second by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file the letter. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo? Yes. Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present, voting aye, to receive and file the letter. Thank you. And finally, the 5th letter. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated April 23rd of 2020 from Victor Schneider, Mayor, to Victor Schneider, Mayor. Report on accounting methods letter dated 12/13 of 18. Dear Mayor Schneider, at the March 5th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting, I distributed to Council the report on accounting methods from the Auditor of State dated 12/13 of 2018. The report outlines 34 control deficiencies and instances of noncompliance with Section 118.10, subsection A of the Ohio Revised Code that must be addressed and submitted to the State Auditor's Office for approval. All 34 deficiencies must be completed and approved as an objective of the Financial Recovery Plan. I have emailed a copy of an Excel spreadsheet listing the 34 control deficiencies with departments that are responsible to address each issue. Additionally, 18 of the 34 control deficiencies and instances of noncompliance require an ordinance written by council. There is a column for the committee that should take care of writing the ordinance. I will discuss all updates at each regular scheduled council meeting and keep the Excel spreadsheet up to date to track progress. Sincerely, Ken Miracle, President of Council.
Mr. Bonsall.
I move we receive and file.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file. Mr. Kelch.
Second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present, voting aye. The motion to receive and file the letter passes. Move on to item T, excuse absent members. All members are present. Item U, adjournment. Mr. Geraci.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Geraci to adjourn. May I have a second? Mr. Bonsall.
I'll second that motion.
Motion to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.